In a world filled with information, where do you turn to get straight talk about retirement, investments, and your money? Lock it in to the longest running financial talk show in Arkansas, and let us help you build the bridge between information and application. Real financial change begins right here, and it starts with you.
It's showtime! Woo!
You know when someone says, we need to talk, that something's up. What's Up on the Get Ready for the Future show is a discussion of how having some important conversations about money could make 2021 a lot better.
This is the Get Ready for the Future show.
And we welcome you into the Get Ready for the Future show, broadcasting all across the state of Arkansas, all around the world, online on Facebook and YouTube. John Shrewsbury, Janet Walker, and Tim Key from our West Little Rock office on the air for you today to talk a little bit about retirement investments and your money, and to have that dreaded conversation. We need to talk.
John, speaking of that dreaded conversation, Tim, when John and I came into the radio room, there was this whiteboard, and I know some of us are seeing, some listeners are actually viewing us also online and can see what I'm holding up, but for those of you listening on the radio, we have this little whiteboard that we use on the show periodically, and it was sitting on the table today, and it said, "We need to talk, ... in all capital letters." And John and I walk in and see that, and we're like,
So we begin to scurry about the marketing department going,
who needs to talk? And they're like, what are you talking about? It was in here for a photo op before the show so we could do a social media promo. But there was this ominous feeling. I mean, and we're the employers. How bad can it be? You know, but still it was, we need to talk. Dum, dum, dum.
Well, guys, to get us started in the show today, research really does tell us that when you have a conversation or talk with a spouse or partner about money, it increases the satisfaction of that relationship. Now, obviously, when you talk about anything in a relationship, it's better than you don't talk, you know. And I'm always reminded about that story of, the couple that went to marriage counseling, and the counselor sat down and said, "Okay, ma'am, we'll start with you." And she looks at the counselor and says, "Well, he never says I love you anymore." And the guy looks at the counselor and says, "Well, I told her the first time that we met, and after that, I figured she already knew, you know." And so there's no conversation. You've got to have conversations about money if you're going to really have a healthy relationship. And Tim, I know that is something that you practiced in your life, and you've seen that actually play out in our clients.
Well, almost everything we do revolves around money. I mean, that's usually behind it. So being able to talk about money and talking about, how you want to spend it, what do you want to do with it, where you want to go with it, those types of things, it just does make a healthier relationship because it does open the conversation to so many other things as well.
Of all the people who need to talk about money, I would say that it's a husband and wife. As far as relationships, it's a husband and wife who need to talk about money more than anybody else. But recent studies showed that married people have the fewest conversations about money out of any type of couple. So that would include people who are cohabitating, dating, or separated. So married people who are doing everything together, spending money together, are the ones who talk about it the least. And this is where I like to use my favorite Dave Ramsey quote. He said, when we were kids growing up, we didn't think our parents had money or sex, and turns out they had both. And because they didn't talk about any of it, we didn't think they had it. So the reality is you have money, therefore you have a need to talk about it.
And so specifically on the show today, we're going to talk about retirement money. We're going to talk about the conversations that you need to have, especially if you're thinking about retirement in the not too distant future. There are actually 6 conversations that we're going to touch on today that we believe would make 2021 better for you, especially if you're going to retire, or maybe if you're going to retire in the next 4 or 5 years. You really do need to be talking about these topics that we're going to cover. So why do we tend to avoid having conversations about money? I wonder about this just even in social settings.
Yeah.
Money still today in 2021 is almost a taboo subject.
I think, especially in the Bible Belt, we get to a biblical misunderstanding sometimes. Scripture does not say that money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. And so, we just are like, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want people to know how much we make. We don't know, the judgment resentment a lot of times that comes along with either having not enough money or maybe even what some people would consider too much. And so we just don't talk about it. But I think another thing in marriage is to understand the differences that you and your spouse are coming from financially. That's been something where my husband and I have been very blessed to be able to remove the emotion of a financial conversation and just talk about the facts. There are wise decisions that my parents made, and some not so wise, but mostly they made wise financial decisions along the way, where his parents didn't make as wise of a financial decision, time after time after time, just because they didn't know to make those decisions. And so he's able to, instead of going, well, that's the way I grew up and that's the way we're going to do it, to step back and just go, all right, what makes sense here, and not have an emotional conversation. Let's just talk about the facts.
Tim, I think money means different things to different people, and oftentimes it is that way in a marriage.
I think, like Janet said, where you come from means a lot. I mean, I grew up in a family, my parents, we lived paycheck to paycheck. I didn't really realize that when we were younger, but as I got older and was going to college and so forth, I mean, I realized that, they didn't have a lot. And, I think we expected a lot from them at times.
Right.
But they did the best they could. And I kind of geared myself to saying that I'm going to have some savings, and I want to make sure that, my family doesn't live paycheck to paycheck. And so I was trying to, we come at it from that direction. And my wife, she kind of came the same way. And my sister was actually upset when I married Lori because I was always a saver, and Lori's a saver too. So my sister was always like, I wanted someone that you'd married to spend all your money, but not that I got a ton of it, but it's so we really have two savers in our family. And so we do kind of come from the same backgrounds, but not all marriages do that. And there's often times we're sitting in a meeting room with someone and starting to talk about what's retirement look like to you. One has thought about it, one has not, and they're not on the same page. And so until you get on the same page, we can't put that financial plan together for you.
And guys, I'll say in marriage relationships, I mean, the number one reason for divorce is financial. And now there's a lot of subcategories that come under that, but it is absolutely the number one reason for divorce. And so you just got to talk about it. You absolutely have to, in order to get on the same page. And I'll tell you, it may not be your page, it may not be your spouse's page. It may need to be somewhere in between where you are and where they are.
And I think you've got to recognize that money is an emotional issue for a lot of people, and they have different emotions about money. I know in my world, I have a thought process about money because of the background that I came from. My wife has a little bit different thought process about it, and it can be emotional, but you can also feel like that you've already had this money conversation. It's kind of like the guy I was talking about that said, I told her I loved her when I first met her. And after that, I figured she already knew. You may be thinking you've already talked about money a few years ago and set all of our expectations at that time. And so we're good. Nothing needs to change. Nothing needs to be talked about, but that's really not the case.
Yeah, I think it has to be an ongoing situation. We talk about your financial life is a video and not a snapshot. In other words, it's ever changing. And because your finances are ever changing, then the conversation needs to be an ongoing conversation. And frankly, the topic changes. Right now at our house, and John's going to get tired of hearing this one, we're talking a lot about college education expenses these days because, man, it's right around the corner. And there's a whole lot of decisions being made partly based on the financial aspect of it. And so we're talking about that a lot. And one of the things we're really trying to do, guys, is to bring, because this is our son's college decision, it's not ours ultimately, it's his, but bringing him in on the financial understanding of all of it so that he's comfortable talking about money when he's married at some point in the future.
Well, especially when you're transitioning from one life stage to another, like college, like retirement, money conversations are very critical. You need to have them. You need to have them. So let's go to school on exactly what you need to be talking about. What conversations should you have with your spouse before the end of the year? We will tell you right after the break. This is the Get Ready for the Future show from Gen Wealth Financial Advisors. We're back in just a couple of minutes. Stay with us. Hey, it's John and Janet from Gen Wealth Financial Advisors, and we are so excited and honored to be named Arkansas Money and Politics Best of the Best in 2020 in two categories. One as Best Financial Advisors, but secondly, Best Women-Owned Business.
Thank you so much for your vote of confidence in us. We know it's the Gen Wealth Financial Advisors name that showed up, but we also know that we couldn't have done it without you. So thank you so much for your support and for your vote of appreciation for Gen Wealth.
There's always been power in standing up for what you believe in, challenging the status quo, and never accepting the ordinary. What about the rest of your life? Will you settle? Or will your retirement be more? More fun, more family than finances, more than just investments. Connect with us at Gen Wealth and harness the power of more.
From the Gen Wealth Radio Network studios, we're back with more of the Get Ready for the Future show.
I'm about to violate all broadcast standards here, guys.
Uh-oh.
Oh, my.
This might not be good.
I get to say a dirty word on the radio and on Facebook and on YouTube.
Mud?
Budget.
Oh, okay. Budget is a 4-letter word
Now,
for many people.
before you reach for the X on the computer or the off button on the radio, hear us out. We need to have budget conversations as we talk about the 6 conversations that you need to have with your spouse as you prepare for retirement. Janet, budget is one of those that just absolutely flies under the radar with a lot of folks, and it is amazing the number of people that come in that really don't have a handle on how much money they need to have coming in for their retirement.
Well, people have never been taught to budget, frankly, in most cases. And Tim, I think you and I are wired very much the same. Like if you took away my budget, I'd probably be curled up in a fetal position over in the corner going, give it back.
It would not be good.
Yeah, yeah. It's important, but I think that the reason that we're wired that way is that we see a budget differently. We see a budget as telling us what we can do. We're telling our dollars what they're going to do instead of a budget telling us what we can't do. And most people feel like a budget is restrictive.
Yes.
I'll tell you, absent, COVID travel restrictions, we take a good trip every year. We do what, within reason, we do what we want to do, but we do it on a budget. We're intentional about it. But what that means, the gift of that, is we get to do it without the guilt and without worrying about, oh my gosh, there's going to be credit card debt when we get back home because we didn't really pay for this trip. We swiped a card for it, or Christmas shopping or whatever it might be. If it's within the realms of the budget, we can do it.
Right. Really, the best vacation is a vacation that doesn't follow you home with that credit card statement that comes every month.
Yeah,
so
the only thing you take home are the pictures you took, and that's
the memories.
it. Yeah.
And so that's really what we're geared toward here. It's not really handcuffs or a straitjacket that we're looking at as far as a budget goes. It's really the opportunity for you to sit down with your spouse and be able to really share and dream about what you want to do and tell your money what to do so you can get there.
So let's talk about the budget that we use. It's a zero-based budget. It's the same concept as what Dave Ramsey uses. And so when you think about the money that you have coming in, and I'm just going to use round figures as an example. Let's say that your take-home is $2,000, okay? Well, when you get that coming in, all that you can spend is $2,000. You can't spend $2,500. It's $2,000. So on paper, on purpose, we're going to go through what are the dollar amounts that are going to go to whatever locations. And for you, decide whether or not you're going to tithe. I tithe off the gross rather than the net. And so, again, just making up numbers, maybe that tithe is $250. So we put that in there. And then that shows me that I don't have $2,000 left now. I have $1,750 because we've used $250 of it for a tithe. And then you just go on down the list and intentionally set aside money for savings, intentionally set aside money for vacation, etc. etc. And the way we have this set up, there are multiple columns. So like if you and your spouse get paid on alternating weeks, you can put the paycheck in, in different columns and say, this one is going towards the mortgage, this one is going towards the car payment, etc. The budget, it is the same one that I've used for many, many years now. And seriously, I mean, we kind of joke about it, but like I have to, on payday, I have to go and touch the budget, open it up and go, okay, what are our priorities? Have they changed any since last time as far as what we're saving for, that type of thing? And many times it doesn't change from one pay period to the next. It's just slow and steady. But we have those conversations to talk about, has it changed and do we need to adjust any of our priorities in the cash flow?
Tim, would you be sure that our health insurance covers obsessive compulsive behavior?
I had to check that first thing when I started. So, we're good. So.
We're in the same boat, man. We're in the same boat. But
so let's talk about actually two types of budgets, Janet, because what you're talking about is a working budget on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis that uses Excel as a spreadsheet and what have you. And if you need that budget, if you would like to have a absolutely free copy of that budget, then email us at info at getreadyforthefuture.com, and in the subject line put zero-based budget. Zero-based budget.
You can just put budget. We'll simplify it. Just put budget.
No, actually, I have a method
Oh, you're
to my
going somewhere else. Go ahead.
Method to my madness here. Zero-based budget. That is for a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month type budget that you can work your family finances on. If you are about to retire, I want to offer you a different budget. This is a retirement income budget, and this will help you to, in your planning process, to understand the difference between required income and desired income, and also will help you to get a handle on exactly how much money you're going to need to actually have coming in on a month-to-month basis for your retirement. So if you're in need of that type of budget, email us at info@getreadyforthefuture.com, and in the subject line, put retirement budget. That's retirement budget for the budget that will help you to determine your desired and required income in retirement. And we will get either of those budgets out to you so you have something to begin this conversation with. Very practical advice, facilitating very practical conversations here on the Get Ready for the Future show.
So your choices are, as a recap, zero-based budget or retirement budget. Either one. Just email us, info@getreadyforthefuture.com.
All right, let's move on to conversation number 2, and that is social life. We talk about this a lot when we are talking to retirees, and we talk to them about retiring from something, but also to something. Because I will tell you that I have seen over my 30 plus years in the financial services business and helping hundreds of people to retire, I have seen people go home and sit down and they end up having a relatively short life because physically they begin to fall apart because they have sat down and done nothing in retirement. As opposed to those people who are very active in retirement, those folks actually do have, on balance, I would say, a much longer life in retirement and a much happier life because their brain is still engaged and their bodies are still engaged.
Hey, guys, I'll give you a very real-life example of the impact. This is really from all the social distancing that's been required from coronavirus, but the concept is the same. If you go home and sit and you're not active, there's a person who was in their 90s and very active, just as spry as could be, drove around, all of that stuff. Healthy, fine. That was earlier this year. At this point, this person is walking around with a walker because of the lack of activity, and it's just made a tremendous difference in their lives. If you don't use your muscles, you lose your muscles at that point. Now that's an extreme example, but the same thing on maybe a little bit lesser scale, but the same thing happens when you're in your 60s or in your 70s. They refer to sitting now as the new smoking because of the impact that it has on your body, and we're just, even at work now, we're not as physically active as previous generations have been. And so when you retire, if you get less active than you already are, which is probably not active enough for most of us, then it really is a health problem. So finding a way to be active is important, whatever that might mean for you.
And 2020 really has, with COVID,
Yeah.
changed our social lives.
It has.
I mean, it's really, a lot of this is what do you do as a couple lots of times. And
Yeah.
to be able to go out and eat, or be able to go to a park and take a hike or whatever it
Right.
is. I mean, those are important things. And a lot of those things were put on hold, especially earlier this year. Some of those things have opened back up. But we really need to be able to focus on things that we do as a couple, because I
Yeah.
know that a lot of couples who have kids and everything's around their kids are gone now, and it's like, what do we do? Who
Yeah.
are you? And
Yeah.
so we really need to have those conversations about things that we really want to be able to do together, and how that you support each other and encourage each other on those things.
You need to be having the conversations that end in the result of somebody saying, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Like there'll be times on the weekend that we're sitting around the house and I am as bored as I can be, because I'm thinking about work, and it's time to get back to work and all that type of thing. And Debbie will go, hey, let's go walk the dogs. And I'm like, great, let's go. It's something to break the monotony.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that I have seen couples in retirement where monotony becomes this ogre that really does eat away not only at their social life, but really at their physical life too. And Janet, you were talking about this whole COVID thing. I had to do some physical therapy recently because I was having a hip problem, and I was like, I've never had a hip problem. I don't know what's going on with this. And I go to the physical therapist, and she goes, you're sitting too much. And it's because of what has happened with COVID. Because I remember early on when COVID hit, I would go into my office at home, and that's where I was basically
Working from home.
Working from home, helping to run the company from home. And I would go in there right after breakfast, like at 8 o'clock in the morning, because, I didn't really have to get ready to go to work. I just walked in there, and it would be like maybe 7 or 8 o'clock at night before I got out of that office, because I got in this work mode and I just never left. And the phone and the computer were basically how I was engaging with people. And I got up to go to the bathroom, and that was it. And so it was incredible how big an impact that had on someone who was, not incredibly active in the past, but I had my moments at least.
Yeah, I think another thing to consider is what are some hobbies that maybe you wanted to do them, maybe it's something you've done in the past and then for a period of time didn't have time to do. That's something my husband and I have been talking about lately. I love to do some different types of crafting things, but frankly, I hadn't had time to in recent years, just with the stage of life that we're in with the kids right now. And I looked at him a couple of nights ago and went, when they leave the house. And he said, oh, I know. He said, and he loves it. Like, he's as excited about it for me as I am. It's not just me, all about me. He's going, honey, we can convert both of their rooms to craft rooms for you if you want to, and he was all over it. And just that mutual excitement, even though that activity is just a me thing, like he's not going to really participate, but he loves that I love it. And so it's something that, we just kind of had a moment about this is something that we're going to do in the future. Find those conversations about retirement, and hopefully most of those things will be something that you can do together.
Hey, there's a great conversation about retirement coming up on Thursday night at 7 o'clock. That is December 3rd. If you're listening on the radio, this has actually already happened, but if you're watching us online, Thursday night, December 3rd, we're hosting a destination retirement workshop here at Gen Wealth Financial Advisors, absolutely free of charge. All you have to do is go to our website, getreadyforthefuture.com/events, and register. It is Destination Retirement. It is the 7 steps that you need to know from a money standpoint what you want to do as far as retirement is concerned, and we'll have that coming up on Thursday night at 7 o'clock. We're back in just a couple of minutes.
At Gen Wealth, one of our standards is that we value good communication. One of my favorite quotes about good communication is from George Bernard Shaw. He said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. If you ever doubt that, come to my house, listen to my 16-year-old son and my 13-year-old daughter having a conversation and see what happens, because they will walk away with completely different understandings of the conversation that has occurred. It happens every time. It's okay, they're still learning communication. But here at Gen Wealth, we believe that that's something you need to experience every time you walk in our door, that you need to feel understood, that you need to feel listened to. So you'll see a change in how we're even communicating. If you're talking about something that's very serious, very personal, you'll even hear a change in our tone of voice, because that's just how good communication is supposed to be. But it also means that we can feed back to you what you've shared with us, just so you know that we're listening. We value good communication.
Want more straight talk about retirement, investments, and your money? Listen to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Now back to the Get Ready for the Future show.
Your financial advisors are on your media device right now saying, we need to talk. But it really doesn't have anything to do with money or investments. It really does need to turn on the conversations that you need to be having with your spouse if you're headed for retirement in the next few years. We are covering 6 conversations, and the third conversation that we want to talk about is where you're going to live, or the long-term living location. We were talking the other day about all kinds of fun stuff at my house, and I had read something online about the 10 best islands internationally to retire to, and one of them was Belize, and Janet has told me that it doesn't need to be Belize, it needs to be Costa Rica. And so
I mean, it's an opinion. That's my personal preference, but you're not wrong in picking what you have talked
and I'm
about.
probably not moving to either of those places. But what is a big conversation with a lot of folks is whether you're going to continue living in retirement in the house that you raised your family in. And that is a big issue for a lot of folks. And I'll just say that it's a big issue for us. We really haven't talked about it yet, but we built a really great home and did that a few years ago. And I love it, but it's got stairs and it's got hills and it's got all this type of thing. And as you get older, you begin to think about those things. And if you want to relocate to some place that has less maintenance, that has less upkeep, or a beach, or anything like that, yeah, that's right. And so no, not a tiny house, Casey. I heard Casey in my ear say tiny house. Not a tiny house. I would wither.
That wouldn't work.
I would wither up in a tiny house. Anyway,
yeah.
The point is, where do you want to be? You need to be having those conversations, Janet.
Well, and that's something that we've talked about even just in the past week. It just kind of randomly came up, which seems weird because we're talking about it on the show. But we've got a large house. When we built it, we were doing foster care, and so it wasn't built just for our family. It was additional bonus family members, if you will. And we're not doing that anymore, so there's already some extra space, but we utilize it a good bit with house guests and that type of thing. But then the question is, what about when we're empty nesters, like what Tim was talking about earlier, and maybe even pre-retirement? What does that look like? And one of the options that we've talked about is we have some acreage behind our house, and if our kids get through college and wind up landing nearby, at this point they're interested in building behind us, and then we just went, okay, whichever one of you has the most kids, the big house goes to you, and we'll take the smaller house, and that's okay, but that's not going to be an option for a lot of families. And it may not be for us, depending on where they land, but we're talking about it. And who knows what we'll actually end up doing. The important thing is that it's an ongoing conversation.
Tim, if she erects a board fence and puts a sign up that says the Walker compound, we're in trouble.
That's right.
I could see that happening. But
yeah.
I could.
She's got a nice place there, and some nice land behind her house, and also that would be ideal. But I think one of the things, we're looking at the same thing now.
Yeah.
We've got 5 years before Harrison goes off to college, and then we're empty nesters, and we love the location of our house, but it's too much.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
And so, is there another place that we could maybe downsize and have a nice place, but not have the stairs and some of those other things that a lot of the people we meet with, I mean, that's what they're considering. They said, they're in their 60s and said, we just can't go up and down the stairs to our bedroom all the time. And so those are some things to just start throwing out there and start thinking about. No quick decision has to be made on it.
Well, I mean, on the flip side, I'll give a different example here. My mom is 80, and her craft room, I came by this naturally, her craft room is upstairs, and she's still just fine with that. And at this point, we're fine with her having that still. There will come a time when we're like, Mom, we need to move the craft room downstairs, or we need another house, but we're not at that point, and it's good exercise for her currently. So just continue to have the conversations.
Yeah, and I think the conversation has to start with, what does this look like? What would you like for this to look like? And begin to have some give and take on it, because you're probably going to find that there's a lot of commonality between husband and wife about what your needs and desires are for a retirement house, if you will. But there are some things that you've got to pay attention to. Small details matter. Are you considering, the location? Do you want to be like me? You want to be by the water, and that's a big deal as far as I'm concerned. I love looking out my back windows and seeing the lake, and that's almost a non-negotiable item as far as I'm concerned. So it kind of limits us to some degree in this area where we can have, because there's just not a lot of bodies of water around that they're building houses around. So those are all big conversations that you need to have concerning your living conditions or your living location. Guys, let's shift the conversation to conversation number 4, and that is about Social Security. Now, you may be asking, well, what is there to talk about? It's Social Security. Send me a check, right? There's a lot that you got to talk about because the claiming strategy of Social Security comes into play here, and really your personal desires come into play as well.
Well, there's a lot of different ways to claim Social Security, and I think we get hit with new ones almost every week, just based on different situations. And I know that we had one this week where a lot of people have waited longer in life to start families and things like that. And if you're Social Security age, you can actually turn on Social Security if you have a minor child in the house, and there's a child benefit that also comes with it. So does it make sense to start your Social Security early so you can get that child benefit? And there's all kinds of different things that can play into this, and everyone's situation is a little bit different. But whether to start Social Security earlier, or whether at full retirement age, or waiting until age 70 when you'll get the maximum amount, it's something you need to start discussing with your spouse, and really meet with a financial advisor that can help you run an analysis and give you some good advice on which way would be best.
I think one of the key elements, guys, to really consider in this is that you get at your house, you get a his and a hers statement. If you are in the age range where they're even getting them, for most of you, you're not even getting them in the mail anymore. You have to go online and download that. But the point is, your household has a his statement and a hers statement. You don't have a theirs Social Security statement, but you need a theirs Social Security claiming strategy, because it is not he can claim it at 62 or full retirement age or 70, and she can claim it at 62 or full retirement age and at 70. It is, how does the household financial plan all work together and create your household Social Security claiming strategy with over 80, so there are 86 different claiming strategies. It's not as simple as, at what age do I take mine? It is, how do we coordinate ours?
I think there can be a lot of mental attachment to your personal Social Security benefit, because you think about, as a husband or a wife, you think about, well, I worked for that benefit. I should be able to take it when I want to. And yes, you can take it when you want to. But is that the best thing for you to do? I think that's the question that you've got to arrive at, is what's best for the family? What's best for the family unit? What's best for the family budget? Because depending on when you take your Social Security, it could mean literally a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars more, especially if you live a long life. And if you get locked into one of those things, then that's a real problem. Go ahead, Janet.
I was just going to talk about this. It seems minor, but it adds up over the years. We had a couple we dealt with a few years ago that when we did their Social Security analysis, they weren't even at the point of, it wasn't time to claim yet. But when we did the analysis, what we showed them was at X point, the wife can use this unique claiming strategy and get $500 a month, even while, he's still working, all of this stuff going on. Well, that was 5 years before they could do it. And then when they got to that point, that's what they wound up doing. And I remember him coming in for an annual review and going, hey, I was looking at this and we're about at that point. Is that really what's going to happen? And I mean, that's $6,000 extra per year. And not that they have to have it, but they can. And that's nice. I mean, that'll cover a vacation. That covers a lot of things. And it's just icing on the cake that if they had not gone through the process, they would have never known.
Tim, one of the things that we have to look at as financial advisors is whether it's prudent for somebody to delay their Social Security. And a lot of that depends on how diligent they've been in savings and what cash they have available to basically fund their income while we're waiting on Social Security to kick in.
Yeah, I think there's a misunderstanding that people think when I quit working, I have to start drawing Social Security. And that's not the case. So if you do have a nice sum of money in your 401k, or you've built up a savings account and that can bridge you for a year or two and delay taking those benefits will be larger when you actually turn that check on. So I think that has something to do with it. And we definitely need to look at, what does your legacy look like as far as what you want to do for your kids, but also how long did your parents live? I mean, what kind of life expectancy are you expecting? Because if it's a short life expectancy, we may want to go ahead and turn it on a little bit earlier and maybe push some of the savings back. So there's different ways that we can go about it.
We always tell people there's a mathematical answer, and then there's here's the real life answer for you. So we're going to get you a mathematical answer, but then if you have a meeting with your doctor that gives you different news than what we were anticipating, then we're going to go ahead and take that check. The other thing, guys, we haven't talked about is the survivor benefit and the importance of maximizing, usually the husband's, not always, but usually the husband's benefit is going to be a little bit more than the wife's benefit. And if that's the case, then we might want to delay taking his benefit, because when one of you passes away, the lower check stops and the bigger check amount continues. So that is the survivor benefit. And if we can maximize that, then it means more money for the surviving spouse, whichever one of you it might be.
Yeah, there are logical, reasonable, rational, mathematical things that you've got to go through in the Social Security thing. Emotion is part of it a little bit, but really and truly what you want is a very logical decision about when to claim Social Security, and there are a lot of moving parts to it. And let me dispel the issue of, well, I got to get mine while I can because they're going to run out up there. Trust me, they've got a printing press. They'll keep printing those checks, and they'll figure out some way to fix Social Security. As a matter of fact, it's on the agenda for the assumed Biden administration at this point. So there will be a fix to Social Security somehow, some way, because politicians definitely want to get reelected, and they know that old people vote, and Social Security is probably not on anybody's list of being cut in Washington at this point. So Social Security conversation is a big conversation that you've got to have. We have two more conversations as we talk about the 6 things that you need to be talking about as you head toward retirement here on the Get Ready for the Future show. We thank you for joining us across the state of Arkansas and around the world online. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Stay with us.
The beauty of a potter's work is that each item is unique. No piece is the same. That's what makes it art. At Gen Wealth, we believe your financial plan should be unique to you. Through our process, your money is carefully shaped around your goals and dreams. Your future, artfully crafted. Call us today or visit our website and connect with us. Gen Wealth Financial Advisors.
I don't think it's any coincidence that the Bible says, fear not, 365 times. one for every day of the year. At Gen Wealth, one of our standards is that we do not fear. We don't fear market downturns because we know that they're going to happen. We just simply plan for those things to happen and work around them. It's one of the things that we believe very earnestly, that you should never fear what you don't understand. You simply find a way to understand it and find a way to use it to your advantage. It's one of the Gen Wealth standards.
Education-driven, strategy-based, team-delivered. That's how we roll on the Get Ready for the Future show, and we're back for more.
Want to remind you about our Destination Retirement Workshop. It is coming up tomorrow night, Thursday night at 7 o'clock here at Gen Wealth Financial Advisors. We're actually doing this online, so you can go to our website, getreadyforthefuture.com/events, and register for that Zoom meeting that we're going to have, that Zoom webinar that we're going to have on Destination Retirement. Janet, these are the 7 things that you need to be sure that you're planning for. And I know we were talking about 6 conversations today, but these are 7 actual things that you do with your money that you need to be prepared as you go into retirement.
Yeah, and when you consider, how much we've talked about that couples don't talk about money, well, I guarantee you they haven't talked about all 7 of these points. Even if you're talking about some things about money, you haven't covered all 7 of them. So tune in, join us, and we'd love to have you. No cost to join us on Thursday night at 7 o'clock. John, how do they do that?
You go to getreadyforthefuture.com/events and register. It's still time to register. We have a limited amount of registrants that we can handle on the webinar, but go ahead and register for that webinar at getreadyforthefuture.com/events.
And this is if you're hearing us live on Wednesday, December 2nd. If you're hearing us on Saturday on the radio show, then you have missed this time. Catch us next time around.
Absolutely. All right. Conversation number 5, guys, is centers around lifestyle. What kind of lifestyle do you want to live in retirement? Do you want it slow and easy? Do you want to do a lot of travel? Do you want to spend your time just hanging out at the house? Or what lifestyle do you want to have? I think being on the same page on that with a husband and wife is very critical.
Yeah, we often talk about the first part of retirement being the go-go years.
Yeah.
And then the slow go, then the no-go
Yeah.
later on. So really the go-go years are probably what we're talking about here, and trying
Right.
to figure out what are we going to be doing with all this time that we have now that we're not going to an 8 to 5 job. So a lot of that can be, and a lot of people want to do, travel. And that's one of the big things, and that's what we work into the plan. But knowing, do you want to do international travel? Do you want to go to national parks? What is that kind of travel? Maybe it's to go see the grandkids. But being on the same page with your spouse on that is very important.
Let me tell you what I think about when I think about this. I like options.
Yeah.
I like freedom. I like to and sometimes when we talk about these conversations that you've got to have and everything's got to be so planned out and everything, that in and of itself is kind of stressful to some people. And so you have to think about this from the standpoint of putting yourself in a position where you've got options. When you wake up one morning and you decide whether or not you're going to go to work. You decide whether or not you're going to go see the grandkids. You decide whether or not you're going to travel next week. All of those things are optional for you, and I think that that's the beauty of what retirement is all about.
And I don't think that it all has to be done together. We've been talking about couples, but I have some really good friends that they have a fabulous marriage. They live in Eastern Tennessee, which is beautiful as it can be, but they have a grandchild in Chicago, and so she will travel quite frequently to go spend time with the grandchild, and he stays home some and he goes some, but he doesn't go nearly as much as she does. But then they do couple trips together. And so it don't feel like if you're not on the same page completely, like I want to go see the grandkids every weekend. If you're not there and one of you is, that's okay. You don't have to do it all together, but just talk through it and be sure that we're planning for it financially, because if it does involve, a lot of plane tickets as an example, then that's got to be something that we build into the budget.
I think another thing that would fall along the lines of lifestyle is who you want to associate with in retirement.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of people that their whole life is wrapped up in their work, and their friends are through work. And when they leave work, then all of a sudden that's a shift in lifestyle, and they wonder, okay, I don't have as much in common with my buddies as I did the last time I went to work. And so that becomes a whole different conversation, Tim, that you've got to have in regard to who you spend your time with.
Yeah, I think as we do life, our friend groups sometimes change. I mean, when you're single, you've got certain friends, you get married, and then all of a sudden you're starting to find couple friends, and it's couple friends without kids. And then you have kids, and it's couple friends with kids. And so now we're moving on into retirement. It's probably not going to be someone who's still working all the time, because that's going to slow you down. You can't take the vacations in the middle of the week sometimes because they're still at work. So you really have to find those folks that you really want to spend time with and you enjoy spending time with, and that make you happy.
Guys, this last conversation is really about putting plans to action, because we've been talking about these conversations revolving around Social Security and lifestyle and this and that. But the big conversation is, okay, what's the plan? How are we going to do this? How are we actually going to make this happen? And I think that's where the conversation actually widens out a little bit. And that's where you bring in your financial advisor and you begin to actually map out on paper, on purpose, how you're going to actually fund whatever you've decided in those other 5 conversations.
John, we talk about this in a parallel way. We talk about this in business all the time. It is one thing to envision the future. It is another thing to implement it.
Right.
And there are different actions required for that. And so you can sit around and talk about and dream about the future all you want, but if you don't do something to implement that and make it a reality, it's not going to become your reality. And as my husband is fond of saying, indecision becomes your decision. So if you don't decide to intentionally do something, then your lack of a decision makes it where you haven't done whatever that is to prepare you for the future. So I would say, we talk about this a lot, I would say to be intentional about your choices and about your actions that will lead you to that point. And that first step, Tim, really is getting a plan together on paper, on purpose.
Yeah, having a plan and being able to sit down with someone. And I love what I do because I'm able to sit down with people and just help their dreams really become a reality on the plan. And the plan can change. That's not something that you're tied into for your entire retirement. I mean, we know life happens. And so we know that, hey, you may have tried a cruise and you didn't like it. So you're going to try something else next time, or whatever that is. We help make those changes, and we're able to help implement the plan for you, and being able to know kind of the cost of those things, and that it's not going to be something that it's hard and fast. I have people call me all the time and they'll say, well, we need to think about this now. We need to think about that. And I think there's even commercials out there talking about retirement changes and the advisor, helping them through that. And that's exactly what we are able to do on a daily basis.
Yeah, let me make it very clear to people that when you do a financial plan for retirement, you are not casting in stone forever and a day, this is how things are going to roll. What you're doing is you're really saying, from where I can see right now, this is the plan going forward. But when I see something different, then I can have another conversation, and then we can look a little bit further. I think about this much like I think about driving. You can't see your destination when you get in the car, but you can see what's right down the road. And then when you make a turn, you can see what's in front of you again. And those little segments of the trip all add up to get you to your destination. And that's really the planning process here at Gen Wealth. We call it the Ready to Retire process. And guys, it's very, very easy for somebody to engage with us in that Ready to Retire process. Janet, walk through with our listeners and viewers what the Ready to Retire process actually looks like from the beginning.
I mean, it starts with a phone call for you to contact Gen Wealth and say, I'd like to meet with an advisor. And from there, we're going to sit down with you. You bring in your information and you tell us your story. And we listen to you and try to understand what your situation is, what your goals and dreams are, and where you are currently. And then from there, your advisor team will take that information and put together a personalized plan on paper, on purpose, that is unique to you and your situation for you and your spouse. And then we get back together and share that information plan with you, make sure that we have a clear understanding of where you are, and then help you understand what are the steps that you're going to need to take in order to make your dreams become a reality. So that's the process that we go through at Gen Wealth here for you, to help you get the plan on paper and then to help you implement it. If you choose to have that plan implemented here, we can help you with those investments. So turning your 401k into an income producing machine, that's a big deal. You know, you've worked all these years to build up those assets. How do you make it give you income when your paycheck stops? So that's the process that we go through. John, what do they need to do if they want to contact us?
Pick up the phone, give us a call, 501-653-7355. You'll get in touch with Anna Olive, our new client coordinator. She will help you get started in the Ready to Retire process. Guys, you heard the final thoughts bell. As we wrap up on the show today, the conversations that you need to have about retirement as you head toward retirement, those 6 critical conversations. Janet, your final thoughts.
I'm going to go back to an action point that you can take today if you would like to have either one of the budgets that we talked about. We talked about zero-based budget and we talked about a retirement budget. If you would like to have either one of those, all you need to do is email us info@getreadyforthefuture.com, and in the subject line either put zero-based budget or put retirement budget, either one, and we'll send that back to you.
Absolutely. Tim?
Well, I think it's being intentional about having these conversations, and it doesn't, obviously don't all have to happen at the same time. And usually I like to have them before I get this little message here that says we need to talk. Normally that comes from my wife when we're just getting ready for bed, and it's usually not good. So being intentional and being able to talk about some of these things, and it really does open up the conversation. It helps your relationship. It gets you on the same page most of the time and gets you an understanding of each other and where you want to go.
I think first, my final thought is that if you're going to have these conversations, have it with your spouse, your other at the house, and then bring in your financial advisor, because the financial advisor can give you a lot of insight that maybe doesn't exist between the two of you and can help you think about things that maybe you haven't thought about in the past. So bring that financial advisor into the conversation fairly early on, and I think you will have a lot higher level of success. All right, that's going to do it for the Get Ready for the Future show for this week. We thank you for being with us all across the state of Arkansas and around the world online. For Tim Key and Janet Walker, I'm John Shrewsbury. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.
The Gen Wealth Financial Team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 501-653-7355. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Gen Wealth Financial Advisors is an Arkansas-registered investment advisor with securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC.